So now I have a suppressor mount for my 375 Ruger and have had a chance to try it out. It significantly reduces recoil and makes it, way more pleasant to shoot. So I want to load up a bunch of rounds for it. Now, it took me a while to find a mount since it's kind of in a stupid thread pitch, but it's fine. The rifle is a Ruger African Hawkeye, and it's a nice Mauser action, controlled round feed rifle. I think this would be a popular, dangerous game rifle if it was chambered in 416 Rem Mag, but it's chambered in proprietary cartridges like 416 and 375 Ruger. The other big boy cartridge it's chambered in is 35 Whelen, which would have been a more practical choice for me, but I wanted a more, bigger bore rifle. Now, I could have gotten it chambered in 416 Ruger, but 416 caliber bullets are quite a bit more expensive, around double the price of 375 rounds, and they're actually quite a bit harder to source than the 375 rounds. As far as I understand it, the 375 Ruger is supposed to be like a modernized 375 Holland and Holland. Fits into a shorter action, gets rid of the belt. You basically get the same ballistics of 375 H&H, but in a shorter barrel. Now, I've also heard these Rugers maybe don't group the best, but we'll see if that's the case for this one. So far, at least on a 50-yard range, all the bullet holes are touching, so it can't be that bad. I've gotten a little better at shooting off the bench, and I want to see if I can work up an accurate load, but this is more about the brass. So the 375 Ruger is a great round, but like I said, it's essentially a proprietary cartridge. Hornady was the only manufacturer of the brass for it for quite a long time, and they're also pretty much the only maker of factory rounds. As of late 2025, ADG has started making brass for it, and I had to check it out. I think it looks pretty nice. The Hornady brass is on the left and the ADG brass is on the right. So for the ADG brass, weights are all within a grain or two of each other, which is pretty decent for such a heavy piece of brass. And they're all at trim length. And by all, I mean, at least all the ones I've checked so far have all been within 1,000th of trim length, so really consistent as well. On average, the ADG brass is a little bit heavier than the Hornady brass. This initially made me kind of worry about case capacity. And it turns out, if you actually go to the ADG website, they specifically mention their cases are a bit tougher because they have added material to the case in different areas. So it can reduce the case volume a little bit. So they always say, work up a load starting at a low charge. So before reading that, I actually did exactly that. I loaded up a few rounds at a pretty low charge just to see what it kind of would look like compared to the Hornady brass. It ended up giving me actually pretty similar velocity. So I went ahead and started working up a ladder. This new ADG brass is comically easy to resize. I wanted to get a firing on some brass just to kind of see what it would look like, measure case volume compared to Hornady, and see what it would feel like with resizing actually fired cases. So I think these must have really well annealed shoulders, so I'm kind of interested to see if there is a big difference in these. That being said, the Hornady brass has been just fine for me. I mean, it comes in a loose bag, so there's going to be some dented up shoulders and stuff like that, but it'll all fireform out. And I haven't actually run into any issues with the Hornady 375 Ruger brass. Oh, I should also mention the primer pockets on the ADG brass are a little bit tighter. I mean, not so tight where you feel like you're going to set a primer off, but definitely a little bit tighter than the Hornady brass. So I think they're going to hold up pretty well. I have a bunch of once fired ADG brass and once fired Hornady brass. I have some more Hornady brass somewhere. I can't find it right now. So before I decap these, let's see how far the shoulder's been blown out compared to some brand new brass. Brand new brass. Okay, I'm going to zero it and see if I can get a repeatable zeroed number. Zero it. And one final time. Okay, so that's zeroed on a new piece of brass. And now the fired ADG brass. Yep, sticking out a little bit. So it looks like 85 or 90 thousandths. Let's try again. Make sure the primer's, okay, yeah, primer's flat on it. So yeah, blowing out the shoulder. So the shoulder grew about 90 thousandths. 85 thousandths. You know what? Actually, just to make sure, I'm going to pop the primer on this one quick. Okay, yeah, so about 80 thousandths. Sorry, when I say 80 thousandths, all those times I said 80 thousandths, I meant 8 thousandths. So it's about 8 thousandths of an inch. So not too bad. Let's see if the Hornady's any different. Hornady brass, 9 thousandths. Let me pop the primer on this one as well. Okay, so it's about the same. As far as cleaning goes, I'm going to throw these in a Gladware container with a little bit of soap and water and a tiny bit of lemon shine. Shake them up, dry them out, wash them out, and then let them air dry, and I will check on them tomorrow. Just something I noticed before I clean these. The necks are quite a bit dirtier on the Hornady brass compared to the ADG brass. Not sure what that means. So I thought about, leaving the primer in a couple of these and measuring water capacity with this, but the Hornady brass was quite a bit longer than the ADG brass. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean them, resize them all, get them basically ready to go, and then put in however many grains it takes to get up to the neck of the rifle, and just kind of, and then put that exact same amount in the ADG brass, and just kind of do a visual inspection to see if they're significantly different. Based on the velocities I got, I'm going to guess they're not particularly different. So for rifle rounds, I don't shoot a ton. I just use Lee case lube. I mean, if I'm loading 223 or something like that, I'd want something I can spray on, but for this, it's not really a big deal. One tube of this stuff, you know, it lasts forever. So supposedly it doesn't mess with, you know, smokeless powder when it dries. So, you know, I'll trust them on it. No expanding mandrels or any really fancy equipment, just the regular Hornady dies. I went with Hornady dies because I guess they made the cartridge and they work fine so far. The bullet sleeve on the seating die is, I don't know, kind of a gimmick, but it does help out a little bit with like those flat base bullets. Anyway, so for Hornady, with the resizing die, the directions say to screw it in until it touches the shell holder. So from experience, I know this actually bumps the shoulder back pretty much the right amount, like around 2000s, which is, you know, perfect for a bolt action rifle. So let's measure the first fired case. So zero that. Make sure it still returns 0. All right, so I got that zeroed in. Let's see what the just regular factory instructions tell you. Get you. Felt like quite a bit of resizing was happening there. Oh, that was more pressure than I would want there to be, but all right. Okay, so it has bumped the shoulder back 2000s. Let's see. Let's do one more with it just where it's currently set. I think I didn't have enough lube in the case neck for the first one. That's 2000s again, 2000s. So I'm going to say that's good. So let's go through and resize the rest of the Hornady brass. Oofa doofa, that's a lot of effort. All right, that's the Hornady brass resize. Let's try some of the ADG brass. Got it zeroed. That was significantly easier to resize. So about 2000s. Let's do another one. Yep, still significantly easier. Okay, that one, bumping it back about 3000s. So again, this is fine for this. So pretty much somewhere between 2 and 3000s, it's bumping back the shoulder, which that works great for me. So let's do the rest of them. You know, just for giggles, this one's pretty well lubed. I want to see if I can actually resize this with the hand press. So I know this isn't going to make this the most precise reloading by switching up a reloading press in the middle of, you know, doing this, but I'll mark that one just saying that that one was the one that was resized differently. If it ends up coming out as being like the same amount of resizing, then I'm not going to bother. A little bit more play with this one. I'm going to try making sure I hold it really tight. There's where it stops. So I will lock that in. It's not going to be easy for the camera. Hopefully I don't stick a case, but we'll see. Oh, this is a bad idea. All right. Oh, okay, yeah, this is a bad idea. Okay, got it closed. The question is, oh, shoot. Oh, nope. Okay, that's not too bad. The neck's going to be a difficult part. Okay, just because there's sharp bits. Oh, let's get some leverage on my leg. Oh, all right. Yeah, you can do it. If I would have like lubed the shit out of it, probably would have worked a little bit better, but these were already pretty well, this was pretty well lubed. Okay. Minus 3 thousandths, a little bit more than 3 thousandths. Oh, yep, a little bit more than 3 thousandths. Not bad. Didn't do too much. Like I said, I will mark this one just in case. Color in the little ADG symbol. Well, I just made a big marker mess on there, so whatever. That's fine. So now I'm gonna wipe the lube off of these. So got them all cleaned off. All the ADG brass looks good. The Hornady brass looks good. I just noticed there's one with kind of a deep gouge out of the shoulder. It's probably fine to still shoot, but I'm just going to set it aside. So quick, let's see what our overall length looks like for the Hornady and for the ADG. So Hornady, 2.582, 2.58. Measure a couple other ones. 2.577, 2.576, 2.576. Wait a minute. How long was this one? 2.582. Let me I gotta see what trim length is. 1 second. All right, so yeah, max length is 2.580. So gonna have to trim at least one of these. Put those ones off to the side. 2.581, 2.5795. So for measuring these earlier, most of the Hornady brass was between like 2.575 and 2.577. The Hornady brass in general was a little bit on the longer side, but still below max case length and a little bit more variance in length. That's what the ADG is running right now. The ADG was pretty much right at 2.570. So this one's 2.5735, 2.573, 2.574, 1.573. So a lot of these grew around 2 to 3 thousandths of an inch on that firing. So I don't think I need to really trim the ADG brass, but I do need to trim these 4 of the Hornady brass. These 4 were still good. I might just use these 4 as my as a reference, just because I don't want to trim everything all at once. But if I'm going to do that, I need to make sure I'm being very specific with how I store this stuff, because I need to know that this is going to be twice fired brass, this is going to be once fired brass. Just got to make sure I keep my notes. I had loaded a few, never fired rounds with a quick ladder that ended up at 75 grains of ram shot big game. And I did that because I didn't want to load any hotter until I had some velocity data for the ADG brass. So for virgin brass, I got an average velocity of 2,597 feet per second with a 75 grain charge. For ease of remembering that, we'll just call it 2,600 feet per second. Now, the Hornady manual for 270 grain spire point bullets, it lists a max charge of 77 grains of ram shot big game, which maxes out at 2,650 feet per second. Now, this was in a 20-inch barrel. My Ruger African has a 23-inch barrel with a suppressor, so we'll call it about 24 inches. So getting 2,600 feet per second out of a 75 grain charge, but a much longer barrel. So I think the charges I'm getting is lining up pretty well with the book velocities. Now, while Hornady maxes out at 77 grains, the Western Powder manual maxes out at 79 grains with a velocity of 2,750 feet per second using a Woodley bullet and a 24-inch barrel. So the bullet is listed as a WLCPP, which I had to look up. I think it's a Woodley weld core protected point bullet. Nosler uses a 260 grain bullet that maxes out at 81 grains. 10 grain lighter bullet, so reduce the charge by a grain or 2. And then the Lyman manual uses a 270 grain A-frame bullet that maxes out at 78.2 grains, and they get a velocity of 2,700 feet per second. So I'm thinking with my barrel, 2,700 feet per second should be kind of the ceiling I'm going to be hitting with a 270 grain bullet, at least staying inside of book charges. Now, I've been told you shouldn't really push these bigger bore cartridges to the limit, so I'm just going to stick with book specs for now. So I think based on the velocities I've gotten, I'm pretty sure I could go up to 78 grains without too much of an issue, but I'm going to work my way up. Since I loaded the unfired brass at 75 grains, I'm going to load up a few at 75 grains again, so I have an apples to apples comparison between once fired and brand new brass. I'm also going to load up a few at 77 grains. 2 grains might seem like a big jump, but that's only a 2.5% increase in powder. So Hornady is the most conservative, but they made the damn round, so my max is going to stay at 77 grains at this time. And like I said, I'll load some of my once fired Hornady brass at 75 grains just to see if there's a difference between the two. now that they're all, resized essentially the same. So I'm going with big game here since I have a decent amount of it and it's cheap, but there are a few different options that I could go with. Now, there's also not a ton of load data for 375 Ruger out there. Looking at what Hornady lists for powders, for what I have the Ramshot Big Game, I have Varget, and I have H4350. Velocity wise, they're all about the same, but I'm not really worried about temperature stability here, so I don't really want to waste my Varget or my H4350 until I actually need to. I think if I actually took this thing to Africa for plains game, or I guess maybe dangerous game, and for that I would probably use the Barnes 300 grain TSX bullet, which actually, if you look at the load data, they list big game as being the most accurate powder, so maybe not a terrible idea to stick with it. Since this is a double base powder, I should probably mention right now I'm shooting during the summer. It's not very humid, but it's still 90 degrees outside. And it's not like I was letting these rounds bake in the sun, but it was pretty warm out. So gonna head out to the range. Doing 4 rounds of the Hornady brass with 75 grains of big game, and then 3 rounds of the ADG brass at 75 grains, and 3 rounds of the ADG brass at 77 grains. And then the remainder I just put back away, made sure to label the brass as, once fired, resized. I would have done a few more rounds, but I'm almost out of this bottle of big game, and I don't really want to switch to a different bottle of powder while I'm testing this. And I will say, so Hornady brass, bullets went in fine. Primer pockets were a little bit looser than the first time they were loaded, so I did notice that. For the ADG brass, bullets seated quite a bit easier. Again, I think these are just really well annealed. And then primer pockets still felt tight. Maybe barely looser than they were last time, but still, I'd say significantly tighter than the Hornady brass. All right, let's head to the range. Brass looks okay. So, what did we learn? So with the Hornady once fired brass with the shoulder bump back around 2000s, we got an average velocity of 2,601 feet per second with an extreme spread of about 40 feet per second. And this was at the 75 grain charge of big game. Not great, but not terrible. This was basically the same as my unfired Hornady brass and the unfired ADG brass. Now, we did get more consistent results with the ADG brass. For a charge of 75 grains, we got an average of 2,591 feet per second and an extreme spread of 17.9 feet per second, which isn't bad at all. Nothing particularly interesting about the brass. Primers look fine, bolt lift was normal. I will mention I did commit the cardinal sin of not chambering the brass after resizing it just to make sure it fits in the gun, but all these chambered just fine. I was really happy with the 77 grain charge of the ADG brass. I think this is actually going to be my go-to load with the 270 grain Hornady interlocks. So at 77 grains, I got an average velocity of 2,670 feet per second and an extreme spread of 7.9 feet per second. Again, 77 grains of big game is the Hornady Bookmax. They got an average velocity of 2,650 feet per second out of a 3-ish inch shorter barrel. So I think this should be keeping me under max pressure. And Hornady has some of the more conservative reloading information out there for 375 Ruger. I'm really happy with how this went and how consistent the ADG brass has been. So I think next step, I think I can go higher up on charge, but at this point, 270 grain bullet with a 77 grain charge of big game going 2,670 feet per second. That's close to 4,300 foot-pounds of energy. That's going to drop anything in the world except maybe, I don't know, like a Cape buffalo or elephant. And it would probably still work with the right bullet choice. So for now, I'm going to quarantine this twice fired brass since right now I have once fired, brand new brass, and twice fired 375 Ruger brass. So I really want to be tracking the number of firings I have on these. I'm also pretty happy with seeing the same velocities with both the Hornady and ADG brass. I'm not going to mix them, but it's just nice knowing a load worked up on one type of brass should be pretty much fine for the other type of brass. I'm keeping track of the firings, but I mean, realistically, with the 50 pieces of ADG brass I have and the amount I actually shoot my African Hawkeye, it's going to be many years before I wear this brass out. If you look at the ADG website, they say All ADG cartridge designs are tested to a minimum of 10 firings at SAMI max pressure with no interfiring annealing needed. With 50 pieces of brass, I'll get around to verifying this in, I don't know, 5 years. All in all, I would recommend the ADG brass, even if it is a bit more expensive. It's kind of like a one-time purchase. I mean, I'm not going to the range and shooting 50 rounds of 375 Ruger at a time. I don't hate my shoulder that much. And hey, you deserve some premium brass every so often. Anyway, thanks for watching.